welcome back. This is MetaNet ICU interviewing Craig Wright, aka Satoshi Nakamoto. We are now talking about trickle-down theory. Over to you, Michael.
Well, Craig, trickle-down theory, does it work in reality?
You have to define what you mean by work. By that, what I mean is it's the old a high tide lifts all boats bit. Now, everyone's better off, but comparatively, there's a bigger difference. So if, for instance, we increase everyone's sort of salary by doubling it every 10 years, then those who were on a higher amount will have even more. So if someone has 1 unit and another person has 10 units, then the person who has 10 units is going to end up with a far greater sum than the person with 1. Now, this means that there can be a greater level of disparity, and that also needs to be considered in sort of when we address other aspects like social mobility, the ability for people to move throughout their lives. Most people don't think about it, but you start, no matter who you are, apart from the sort of wealthiest people at the bottom, you move up and then you move down again. As you retire, you start spending money and your wealth goes down, for most people anyway. So looking at this concept of trickle-down theory, as more people have more money in a capitalist society, and if it's sort of a well-structured society and not a kleptocracy, then we end up with everyone being wealthier. In the United States, people complain about poverty, but poverty in the US is better than middle class in many countries in Africa. So if you go to Kenya, where I've spent a bit of time in the past, or many other countries over in that part of the world, then people would be sort of happy to have poverty in the United States. There's a reason why people try and come from South America and cross the border into America, the United States. It's because they have a better life, even without welfare. So the argument needs to be taken into sort of a series of definitions that define what we're talking about. And if we say that trickle-down theory doesn't make everyone equal, then that's correct. It won't. But everyone's better off. And everyone having opportunities to study and develop and start a business and have equality under law, etc., is something that needs to be considered. Now, a lot of people will then argue that it's not fair, it's not equal, you had more than me, which is reality. But my mother or father hadn't gone to university, single mother from the time I was 5, and you can sit there arguing, oh, but I had other people to stand on. No, I didn't. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur because I'm autistic. I don't really get on well. I don't interview well. So that was never something I did well, and I had to build my own companies to make my future. I'm lucky that I'm intelligent enough to do that. Some people aren't. But then there are other options that people can do. They could start their own plumbing business even. Knew someone in Australia, couldn't say he was the smartest guy on the block, so to speak, but he was worth, before we left, like 2015, probably 20 to 25 million, self-made. He did that by making a garbage collection empire. So there are always sort of opportunities out there if people are willing to take them.
I'm wondering, where does universal basic income tie into all of this? Is UBI some kind of outflow from the trickle-down theory, or is it a push?
No, that's communism. Pure and simple. That is people who have 2 brain cells and have then had a drink of alcohol and petrified both of them. UBI is one of the stupidest ever inventions come up by mankind. It's up there with the self-home lobotomy kit.
But there is a push for UBI. So let's talk about that, because
I don't know if there's
mean,
a push for UBI. There are a few rich assholes who want to see a system where they think that they're doing a lot of good and things like that. I mean, most communism's only ever really pushed by rich assholes. It's never in history been pushed by the lower people, in lower class sort of people in society, the poor. They're used and they tricked into becoming mobs, but uh, like Stalin was not poor. Marx was only self-inflicted poor because he spent more than he ever earned.
and he had quite rich friends, by the way.
Engels was,
Yeah.
in today's standards, a billionaire. Oh no, it's terrible. I'm not earning much money. Give me more. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are a lot of those. The Fabians were all aristocratic.
But UBI concerning trickle-down theory, I'm wondering if trickle is it
But
there?
how does that trickle down anything? UBI just increases inflation. You don't produce more goods.
I'm not
So
advocating for it. I'm trying to understand it. It's their way.
it's just it's
to
moronic.
trickle down.
But it isn't trickle down.
I agree. Yeah.
So all you do is you cause inflation, and then you raise the prices, and you cause more inflation, and you raise the prices. So, I mean, what's it meant to solve? How do you get more to people using trickle? I mean, it's not trickle down for a start. It is setting this is you don't need to work. So now we have a group of people who no longer think they need to work or be part of society. It's premised on a complete bullshit idea of artificial intelligence that won't be there in my lifetime, my grandchildren's lifetime. My grandchildren's 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 lifetime will not be premised by a general AI. So there won't be automated vehicles. There won't be all the Tesla promises. There won't be going to Mars and mining. That's all bullshit that people use to get government money. When people talk about self-driving vehicles, they talk about as if we've got to the 90% mark, and now all we need is that last 10%, and they treat it as if it's equal. It's not. The last 10% takes 100 times the amount of effort as the first 90%. And then the next sort of fraction of that takes 1,000 times, etc. So the closer we get to where we can actually have something that is as smart as a spider, which we're not at, is a long way away. And we're not even going about analyzing how sort of the neocortex functions correctly. So the way that we believe, like in artificial intelligence, we model neuronal perceptrons, isn't like a columnar structure in the neocortex at all. It's not even similar, not even remotely similar to being similar. So all this, we're going to not have truck drivers. BS. We will have truck drivers. It's just an excuse for people like Uber to say that we're automating vehicles. We can automate vehicles and they can drive in perfect conditions as long as the cat doesn't run out on the road, as long as the children don't play ball, as long as no one paints trucks white because, well, that will confuse the poor computer.
So would you say we are living in a trickle-down theory world already, even though people complain about inequality?
We're living in a world where people who are earning less money end up earning more because they have more opportunities. Now, if you look at it, we have a world where people get an immense level of education compared to the past. I mean, if you look at the United States, people will complain, oh, we don't get a university education, but so what? Not everyone needs a university education. 12 years of schooling and then being able to do an apprenticeship is actually quite a good thing for a lot of people. Not everyone is going to benefit by having a degree. In fact, the majority of people that are being pushed into getting degrees now will probably never repay them for what they're doing. It's no good getting a whole lot of qualifications to become a social worker, yet another one, and earning 30,000 a year, and then building up, as some people have, $300,000 worth of debt. And there are people like with that exact scenario in the United States right now, and that is just an insane concept. My view on all of this is we need to push more of the concept of sort of educational apprenticeships. We need to have people who do some university skills while working and earning, and proving to employers that they will work and earn, and having that part of, here you're now going to be tethered to this employer for a while to pay things back. That's actually a model that existed in the past and does exist with some organizations right now. So do I believe trickle-down works? Yes, I believe social mobility works too, but a lot of the problems that we're now seeing are people introducing more socialist concepts and ruining that.
And why? Why do we have this push to socialism? Is it because the elites actually fail to trickle down their wealth on a free will basis?
No, not at all. No, people don't. You're not owed a living.
I know.
So the problem here is people thinking that someone else has more. It's envy. It's greed. So
no, I mean, you mentioned.
No, we got to get back to nationalism and religion and all of these other things that a lot of elites are basically saying are bad. They're not. We should be proud to be British or proud to be American. Western culture should be promoted. If you're Chinese, then try and get rid of some of the BS that's replacing it and bring back ideas of Chinese culture. To an extent, it was happening, but we'll see. But British culture, we should be proud of it. Yes, the Brits were nowhere near perfect. I'll very much admit that. The colonial record was spotty at best, but it's still one of the best ones ever. It is a record that introduced sort of the abolition of slavery and forced that around the world at gunpoint. It is a record that introduced education into places like India and a lot of Africa. I mean, the sort of training of a lot of white paternalistic assholes could have been better, but individuals like Gandhi learnt by actually going into Oxbridge and having a proper education. Unfortunately, he went to South Africa, where there were at the time a bunch of separatist white assholes who were still impacted by the Dutch Boer type mentality. And most people don't even seem to realize that like the anti-Boer war sort of aspects, most people fail to understand that that was because the Boers had started enslaving many of the native groups in the area of South Africa, and the British, who had banned slavery in their territories, told them to stop, and they got into a big fight because, well, the Boers wanted slavery, the British said no. So we need to actually start teaching people the reality of all this. If we look at now Afghanistan again, we've had 20 years of starting to build a culture and everyone's going, but it's enough. It's not. The reality is to slowly change a culture and acclimatize it to a free world isn't 20 years. It's more like 200. We should have been there the same as a Pax Romana occurred and sort of settled much of Europe for hundreds of years, expecting to be there for at least 100 years. If we expect to be there for at least 100 years, don't try and make these kleptocracies where we have governments that are out of control, like occurred in the Philippines, even with the Marcos. We want to start building good, strong institutions that we take responsibility for, where we will have people who are no longer fundamentalist fools, but can actually think about all of the aspects of their own past. Not try to Americanize them, but rather try to introduce rational thought. And even if they'd done that correctly, they could have allowed sort of a Islamic state based on the ideas of Imam Khadhi. A lot of the sort of early sort of Islamic scholars who had promoted Aristotle and others could have been brought in as examples. People could have been brought in and taught their own culture. So, but that takes a long time. So you can then expand out in an Islamic school, a madrasa over there, etc. The nature of how the Prophet's wife was actually a businesswoman. She chose to wear the veil. She didn't do it because she had to. She did it by choice to differentiate herself from other groups, and then teach people how, even in Islamic culture, the sort of forcing women not to work is very anti-Quranic law, apart from some of the 19th century reinterpretations that you see. So all of that could have happened. That's the difference in how you would do a good colonialism and take the good parts of it, teach people how to be rational and integrate them, not to be tribal.
Yeah. Are you talking about some kind of trickle-down theory concerning culture?
All of the above. So we're talking about, here's a thing for you. Most people make wealth not by working as a sort of laborer or slowly saving over 40 years. That will get you some and you'll retire nicely if you do it really disciplined. You get wealth by taking risk and being an entrepreneur, by starting a bakery and then trying to make another bakery and that sort of thing. So that doesn't mean you need to be a Bill Gates. It does mean that you need to take risk and try and build something. Not everyone can do that, I admit. There will be always people who are just incapable of some of these things, contrary to the sort of school of thought by Dewey and others where everyone is able to be taught. Not everyone is. But right now in America, immigrants from Africa are more entrepreneurial than many of the poor groups, the minorities in in America, and teaching people to not expect handouts, not to be envious, not to blame, but to create their own future is important. So teach people not just to wait for handouts, build something. So rather than Black Lives Matter, I'll say it, all lives matter, Black Lives Matter and that whole communist fist thing sucks. What matters is teaching them not to be socialist and teaching them to go out there and start a business. Start interacting with the community. Don't wait for handouts. Don't wait for the Democrats to give you money. Make it yourself. It's not a zero-sum game. Business is about making more, a bigger pie, growth of society. Be part of it, embrace it. Show people like me, white guy, who's not privileged, I am now, but I wasn't, that you can do more. That's what should matter. Show people up by not being envious, by being better, by being more sort of capable, by sitting there and building something bigger, better, faster, stronger, all that sort of stuff.
All right. Thanks.
Excellent.